Do you want to get better at jungling in League of Legends? Jungle is by far the most unique role in League. It doesn't really have a lot of transferable skills from other roles. And as such, if you're new to jungling or you're just trying to figure out really how it works, it can be kind of tricky. So I want to help you with that today. This season I reached High Diamond with Master Tier MMR. I've also been working with and talking to Challenger players, Pro players. So all the advice in this video should help you no matter what rank you're at. So without any further ado, this is how you win more games in the jungle in League of Legends. First things first, you gotta understand your role. What is the purpose of your existence? What is it that you're trying to do on the Rift? Do you just pass the ketchup so that your teammates can enjoy their well-done steak? Well, actually, kind of, yeah. Jungle's a lot like working in retail. Instead of crappy customers, you have crappy teammates that will yell at you for things that really aren't your fault. I like to liken the role of a jungler as someone that leads the horses to water. Unfortunately, if you're familiar with the rest of that phrase, you also know that you can't make the horses drink the water. And to be honest, that's why jungling can be really frustrating to play, and why you can also have a lot of self-doubt and question what it is that you're doing, because even if you are the best horse wrangler in the world, if they don't drink, they're still going to die of thirst. You're still going to lose that game. You're going to get minus 18 LP and you're going to get flamed. To be more specific about that analogy as far as it pertains to League of Legends and being a jungler, your role is to try and get your teammates fed, to try and get them in a position where they can then do their job to win the game. The most black and white example of that is ganking. You go to people's lanes, get them kills, get them ahead so they can win their lane, get strong, that kind of thing. But it also applies to things like breaking a freeze. If your teammate's got a really bad lane state, you might want to show up, push the minions under the tower to reset the wave and help your teammate out. This is not a super in-depth video because I could talk for like, I don't know, a whole hour or so about this one point itself. But generally speaking, just think to yourself, okay, does this help lead the horses to water? Alternatively speaking, if you really hate the idea that you have to lead them but you can't make them drink, just whip out your own Stanley Cup or whatever the kids are using these days, scoop out of the fountain and guzzle that water down for yourself. This is more about getting yourself fed, putting the team on your back, being that guy and carrying that way. The upside to that playstyle is that it doesn't involve your teammates quite as much, so it's more just about you and your performance. That's why you see this kind of playstyle used by Smurfs, for example. The downside to this is you really have to be that guy. And it is not easy to be that guy. It is a punishing playstyle and it is not easy to execute. And I'm just going to be entirely honest, you're watching a video about how to win more games of League of Legends. There's a good chance you're not that guy. And that's fine. I'm not that guy either. And so it's probably not a playstyle we should do. Another way to win more games as a jungler in League of Legends is to keep track of the enemy jungler and communicate that with your team. This one can be a little bit tricky at first, but once you practice it, you will get good at it. It's not as daunting as it seems, I promise, and it makes a pretty big difference. Just think of all the times people have typed jungle gap, my jungle sucks, enemy jungle's ganking so much. Tracking the enemy jungler will directly hinder his effectiveness, his ability to boink your teammates. And boom, no more jungle gap. Enemy jungler's useless, he's not doing anything. I mean, of course, it will still be jungle gap when your teammates lose 1v1. That's obviously still your fault. It's not, but it is. We all know it is. And of course, you will perfectly track the enemy jungler. You'll warn your teammates that he's coming to kill them, and they'll still die to him. And yes, that's, again, jungle gap. It's not, but yes, it is. But in all seriousness, the more that you know what the enemy jungler's up to, the more that you can warn your team with pings and typing, the less effective he will be. And an ineffective enemy jungler is a very good way to win more games of League. So how do you track the enemy jungler? Again, this is a topic that can be a little bit convoluted if you want to cover absolutely everything. We're not going to do that in this video, but some little tips to get you started. If you have an idea of where the enemy jungler is starting, then and you can pretty much infer where he's going to be at any given time. Thing is, as a jungler yourself, he's probably going to be doing something similar to what you're doing. So especially at the start of the game, if you're on your 4th camp, he's probably on his 4th camp or thereabouts too. How do you know where the enemy jungler is going to start? Well, different champions have a tendency to start at different places. For example, champions with more AoE clears like Hecarim, Kayn, they'll start more towards their red side so they can take advantage of chickens and Krugs, which are more AoE focused. By default, in general, most junglers tend to start at the top side of the map, so that once they've finished their full clear, they're at the bottom side and can gank bot lane. Ganking bot is a good default go-to strategy as a jungler, so that's why that happens. And lastly, and honestly the easiest way to track the enemy jungler, is just to see where he is with your wards. You can do this throughout the entirety of the game. Obviously, put a ward down on his chicken camp or something like that, or a deep ward with a pink somewhere in a bush that he's not going to check. In high elo, your mid laner will tend to ward the enemy chickens or the enemy red buff. This is not something that I see outside of like Master Tier Plus, so if you want your mid lane to do it, you'll have to ask them to do it. There's a good chance even if you do ask, they won't, which is, it is what it is. So you yourself can put your ward down at an enemy buff. If you see them there at level 1, well, congrats, you found the enemy jungler. And if you don't see them there, there's a good chance they're starting on the other side of the map. Third piece of advice for winning more games as a jungler in League of Legends is to use the objective timers to tell you where to go and what to do at any given time. Jungle is a very unique role because in theory, you can be doing pretty much anything, going anywhere at any given time. The only caveat to that is you can't be everywhere all at once doing everything. As much as your laners would have you believe otherwise, you do have to pick something and can only do one thing at a time. The difficulty in jungling comes with the opportunity cost of all the decisions that you make. So, for example, if you gank top lane, you are not farming your jungle, you're not invading the enemy jungler, you are not ganking mid, you are not ganking bot. So then you have to think, what makes ganking top better than all your other options? This is something, again, quite a complex topic. If you really want to cover everything, we're not going to do that today, but it can be simplified, as we said at the beginning of this point, by letting the objectives and objective timers tell you where to go. If you see that grubs are spawning in 30 seconds, then maybe you want to head towards the top side of the map. Maybe that would be a good time to stick a ward down in the enemy top side jungle. That would be a good time to potentially go and gank top lane or mid lane so that they're ready to help you out when those grubs spawn. There will be times, however, where you can't contest an objective like grubs or dragon. Maybe you and your team aren't quite as strong as the enemy team and they'd stop you if you went for it. Well, you can still use objectives to tell you what to do, because if the grubs are spawning and you can't contest it, you can probably assume that the enemy team is going to go for that. So that's when you go to the bot side of the map and you do something over there instead. Important note about this one as well is you don't just want to press tab, see that something's up and be like, oh, I'll just go over there now. A lot of objective play isn't just about taking the objective when it spawns, but the setup, 1 minute, 30 seconds before it comes up. As I hinted at as well, these objective timers give you a little bit of an insight into what the enemy jungler might be thinking about doing. So if Dragon's about to spawn and your bot lane's pushing up, well, you can bet your fuzzy bottom that the enemy jungler is probably going to pay a visit to your bot laners, in which case you can be there ready and waiting to turn that gank around, counter it, and then go for dragon afterwards. Last thing I mentioned on this point is be careful about who you're playing against. Some junglers are really horny for certain types of objectives. If you're playing versus champions like Shyvana, Warwick, Vi, they're really good at taking early dragons. They may even take it on spawn, so just be aware. Speaking of the uniqueness of different champions, our next point about how to win more games as a jungler in League of Legends is to really think about your champion's strengths and weaknesses and adapt your playstyle. This is something that is more prevalent around, I'd say, gold, plat, and below. But yeah, I see it all the time, to be honest. If I'm ever on an account at that elo, it doesn't matter who they're playing. If they play a Mumu or Volibear, who are two champions with very different playstyles, they'll still do the same thing and play the same way. The Mumu in question might be spam ganking right from level 3 when he doesn't really provide a massive amount. He might be trying to contest things against an enemy jungler that's a scrappy, fighter, skirmishy style champion, and he'll just get twatted. Likewise, the Volibear in this situation might be full clearing, playing really passive, really scared, when this is a champion that is really good at being aggressive early and needs to have advantages early in order to succeed. Thinking about your champion's identity will not only avoid bad situations and scenarios that will lead to you losing the game, but also it's a really simple, easy, effective way of having a game plan when you're in the jungle. Similar to what I was saying in the previous point about your opportunity cost and where you're going at any given time. If you're playing Zinzao, for example, then maybe a gank looks a little bit more juicy. And if you're playing Karthus, maybe that gank doesn't look so juicy. It's more about being in that situation where you're thinking to yourself, what the hell am I meant to be doing right now? It at least gives you a little bit of direction and an answer to that question. And lastly, another way to win more games as a jungler in League of Legends, and to be honest, I'm going to say this is probably the least appreciated point on this list, right? So buckle up and pay attention. This applies to any role, not just a jungler, but it is more relevant to junglers because they tend to be the playmakers of the team. If you are getting piped, you are getting shat on from a great height, you gotta take some risks. If you're in a game where it's looking mega doomed, you're struggling, your teammates are struggling, nothing's working out for you. If you let that game play out the way it's going, if you steer the course, then yeah, it will be mega doomed and you'll lose. The best way to think about this kind of thing is to think about it from a statistical perspective. When I say that, what I mean is, let's say you're in a game that's like 95% lost. That means that in theory, if you did a play that was like a bad play and would lose you the game 90% of the time, then given the context of that game, that's a fantastic play. That's going to give you double the chances of winning, right? That's a 10% chance of winning compared to the 5% chance you already were at. Even though in a vacuum, a play that only has a 10% chance of working out, yeah, that's a terrible play that you probably shouldn't do. When you are losing, when it is doomed, that 10%, it's a godsend. You got to swallow your pride and your KDA alongside it, most likely, and look for those risky plays. Obviously, there's no algorithm to determine what percentage chance you have of winning at any given time and what percentage chance the play has of working out. I know we're kind of just like making those numbers up and stuff, but you know, you get the concept of what I'm talking about. Importantly though, there is an exception to this if you have a really like hyper scaling team. And to be honest, you're probably expected to lose early and you'll come online in like 30-40 minutes. If you've got a hyper scaling team comp, then yeah, don't flip the game on these plays and instead just try and like not lose as best you can and then come online when it matters. That is all I want to talk about for this video. However, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you picked up some tips and some good stuff about how to win some more games in the old jingle jangle. If you have any questions about this video or just jungling in general, League of Legends in general, then feel free to leave them down below in the comments and I will answer your questions. But aside from that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it is where you are from. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, I don't know, all that algorithm bollocks. Most importantly, thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day and I will see you in my next video.